And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. All right, like I said, let's get into more of these top headlines and bring you what was an exclusive to Fox News Digital about this time last night. This was first on Fox, and you might have heard this story by now, but President-elect Donald Trump is suing the Des Moines Register and its top pollster, Ann Selzer, for quote-unquote brazen election interference and fraud over its final 2024 presidential poll, showing Vice President Harris leading him in Iowa despite his ultimate victory there in the Hawkeye state by 13 points. So we want to talk about this particular defamation lawsuit with our friend, legal analyst Trey Lavelle. He joins me. And Trey, good to see you as always. We know, and we covered this over the weekend, President-elect Trump notched a huge victory over a media organization over the weekend. I'm talking about ABC News, this $15 million settlement that was reached over the weekend between ABC News and their anchor, George Stephanopoulos, over some of these inaccurate claims leveled by Stephanopoulos against Trump about the E. Jean Carroll defamation lawsuit that rendered a verdict that found Trump civilly liable for sexual abuse, not rape. That was the question at issue in this lawsuit. In this one here that Trump is filing, this is about a poll and a poll's results in one particular state ahead of the election. This was 2 weekends, I think, before the election. It got a lot of attention because it was quite a wild outlier, showing that Trump was down by 4 against Harris in the state of Iowa. Of course, he ultimately won the state of Iowa by 13 points against Harris here. Does Trump have a case, Trey?
You know, not really. I mean, first, there's a distinction. You know, the Iowa case, it's not really based on defamation. It's based on a consumer protection statute, basically saying that you can't, implement false or deceptive practices that people are going to rely upon, to their detriment. So what Trump is trying to say is, hey, the Des Moines Register, through its pollster, had a deceptive practice to manipulate the polling and actually make a false prediction, to try to hurt Trump and sway more voters. So the gist of the action is that. However, it's got a lot of difficulty in trying to prove it.
So, according to Fox News Digital, the lawsuit was filed last night in Polk County, Iowa, under the Iowa Consumer Fraud Act and related provisions. It says it seeks, quote, accountability for brazen election interference committed by the Des Moines Register and Selzer in favor of now defeated former Democrat candidate Kamala Harris through use of a leaked and manipulated Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll conducted by Selzer and SNC and published by the Des Moines Register and Gannett in the paper November the 2nd. So 3 days before the election, not 2 weekends before the election. Just want to correct the record there. So this was very close to the election. He's citing and claiming, Trey, election interference that the poll rendered on the national electorate or Iowa voters. Trey, Trump won the election. Will that claim stand?
As I said, I don't think so, because there's no real damage here, right? He won the election, as you correctly pointed out. So even if the poll was inaccurate, it didn't hurt him in any way. Plus, if you kind of look at it, he's saying that the pollster intended to manipulate the poll so she could help the Democrats. But, pollsters, their credibility comes from their accuracy. The way that people listen to them, the way that people hire them is because they're good pollsters and they're accurate. So to think that they would take a dive or sacrifice their credibility, to choose a political side really doesn't make sense. And in addition, as you noted, there's no real damage here because Trump won.
So, Trey, I mean, before this poll was released 3 days before the election, showing that Harris was up 4 points over Trump there in Iowa, Ann Selzer, I just want to give a background for the viewers. Ann Selzer and her poll in Iowa was considered the gold standard. Obviously, Iowa is one of the first caucus states in the primary process as we are trying to figure out who the nominees for both parties are going to be in presidential elections and contests. In the wake of the release of this poll and the subsequent criticism of her and her polling company, she retired and stepped back from polling altogether. Of course, her reputation obviously taking a hit from this here. But does it give you pause? Should, I guess, journalists like myself and pollsters take pause and have concern that now the president-elect is going after some of them in a lawsuit because a poll came out that he didn't like? Does that give you pause?
It does, and the problem is that these lawsuits, the Des Moines Register lawsuit, the defamation lawsuit against ABC, the defamation lawsuit against the Pulitzer Board, a number of these other cases are not really meant to win. They're meant to push back on what Trump believes is a media that's against him and things that he doesn't like. And so the real reason for these lawsuits, is not going to be to win. Most of them, if not all, are not going to win, except for the ABC lawsuit that they settled. But had that gone to court, that's questionable.
So, Trey, I think the ABC settlement is somewhat of an outlier and an anomaly when it comes to so many of Trump's lawsuits against media organizations, CNN, the New York Times, most recently. Also, I believe it was $1 billion defamation suit he brought against CBS News over alleged editing of the 60 Minutes piece that Vice President Harris sat for before the election here. So he's usually kind of, 0 for 3 or 0 for 4 in some of these, but not over the weekend with the ABC case. So he's maybe riding high, and that is maybe why he brought this case. How is it going to do in court? Are we going to even get to a settlement phase here, or could this be dismissed outright?
There's a strong chance it could be dismissed outright. Because of whether or not it was actually reasonable to rely on it since it's a poll, whether there were damages, there's some pleading aspects. So there's a good chance that it could get kicked. But what it's doing is now when the media is going to write stories about Trump or publish or broadcast stories about Trump, they're going to take a second look and dot their I's and cross their T's because he's out there gunning. And that's what he wants. And so, Trump and the Republicans, I think, largely feel that they're going against a biased media, and the only way to fight back is to sue, to try to, cause a chilling effect. Hopefully, that then they'll vet out the stories or not be so much against them. So this is a very interesting strategy on both sides, with the media and with Trump.
So, talking about filing the lawsuits in particular, could you foresee or envision a scenario in which, Trump's legal team is not necessarily seeking damages, but maybe just an acknowledgement of, something that was incorrect and an apology? Could you see that being the ultimate result of this?
Absolutely. I think Trump wants an apology. I think he wants recognition that he was right, they were wrong, what they said about him was wrong. And if he gets that, I think he's ready to move on. He doesn't need the money. He's not doing this for the money, but he's extremely upset and agitated that all these negative stories are coming about him, and many stories that he believes are false. So if A, they stop doing it, or B, if they do it and they say they're sorry, have a retraction, I think that's going to go a long way with him as opposed to other people. It may not. So yes, I think that's what he really wants. And I think the media outlets would be surprised if they gave it to him, how quickly he'd back off.
Okay, Trey, though, if you're the Des Moines Register, if you're Mediacom, if you're Ann Selzer's polling company here, and you saw what just transpired with the ABC News settlement of $15 million, I mean, you have to be really kind of girding yourself for a legal fight ahead. And, I don't want to say this because I'm not entirely sure, but I would imagine that, the Des Moines Register and Ann Selzer's polling company don't have the funds or the resources like a behemoth network of ABC News.
That's true. And money is always a great consideration, whether they can afford it. It's kind of tough because, the only way the media is going to chill Trump is by fighting back and pushing back on every single case. And when he loses after loses, maybe he'll get tired and stop filing them. So they need to stand firm and not give in. But like you said, there's lesser solvent outfits such as the Des Moines Register and smaller newspapers who can't afford the fight. So they're going to have to be a little strategic in how they deal with it. And basically, it's calling up the lawyers and say, listen, What does he want? Does he want a retraction? Does he really want money? We don't have money, so this is not going to get us anywhere. Does he want an admission? And depending on what he really wants behind the scenes, that he's not going to say in public, to try to work within that. That's what good lawyers do for their clients.
Okay.
It's about the resolution and saving the client.
You know, if this does get to, a further along phase than it is right now, it's just been filed. We don't know when, the first hearing is. We don't know when lawyers are going to be meeting here. But say it does get to that stage. The Trump legal team is alleging that, the poll was created out of whole cloth in order to influence the presidential election here. Could you imagine a scenario where Ann Selzer is brought in and deposed, and she has to go through line by line her polling methodology about how she got to that result?
I mean, if the lawsuit goes that far into discovery where they're doing depositions, that's exactly what she would have to do. Because the standard is, you have this deceptive practice that you either know is deceptive or you should have known. So they're going to have, and the should have known me is a negligent standard. It's a lesser standard. So they're going to have to show that she was negligent in issuing these numbers and having this poll, and she's going to have to defend against that, or the register through her, by saying, no, we did everything we were supposed to do. These are what the numbers were. These are what the call said. This is the methodology. We weren't negligent. It just happened to be off. So she will have to explain herself and defeat, the negligence claim side of this, that she was negligent in this claim, in this poll. And certainly the intentional side doesn't make sense. As I said, why would she sabotage her own reputation, but to go for Kamala Harris? That doesn't make sense. But yes, she will be, if this goes further, she will be in the middle of it.
Yeah, and the Trump team is also claiming that the poll was leaked, in some capacity as well, 3 days before the election here. So we're just going to have to watch it. Trey Lavelle, as always, thanks so much for your time and your expertise. We'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right, in the meantime here, let's take a quick commercial break. A lot more top headlines where that came from on this very busy Tuesday when we come back. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us. A little past the bottom of the hour now, a little past 8:30 there. In the Northeast near Baltimore, Maryland. We want to go to Towson, Maryland right now. Take a look at this. This is a breaking news scene that we have. Police are investigating a shooting there, and it appears to be very, very active. This is a live picture. This is coming to us courtesy of WBFF there, the local station. And so we just got on the scene there. You can see a lot of law enforcement, also fire on scene, responding to this. I want to put this tweet up here from the Baltimore County Police Department. This is what they say, that they're currently on the scene of a shooting in the area of Loch Raven Boulevard. They say, please stay out of the area, and they have an address for media staging area. And you can see there, let's take it back. You can see there a lot of these firefighters and emergency response officials kind of commiserating and gathering in some type of, meeting of the minds. Maybe it's a planning meeting. Maybe they're getting their ducks in the row ahead of some type of press conference, possibly. But police investigating a shooting there. That's about all we know. As you know, some of these shooting investigations are very fluid, and information changes on a dime. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. Fox Baltimore has this. Let's put this tweet up here. That sources are confirming to them at Fox 45 that at least 7 people were shot and that 1 is dead in a mass shooting incident in Towson this evening. So they are at Fox 45 Baltimore. They're describing this as a mass shooting. And so back out live to the scene there. You can see all the police tape set up. This is a huge response. You see the gas station there. You see a car wash there. So I'm not entirely sure if this is some type of residential area or near it. We also see the long yellow hose from the fire truck. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here that potentially something may have been on fire, but presumably if that's been deployed, firefighters would need it to extinguish some type of fire. Don't know that just yet. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing right now. And so it's about 8:40 there, Eastern time on this Tuesday night. So police are investigating a shooting. Towson is about 20 miles north of Baltimore. If you're familiar with the area here, are a lot of firefighters on the scene there. Take a look at that. They're walking in the frame. This is just a massive, massive response. And hopefully we do get some type of police update or fire update. From my vantage point, and you can see it too, I see more firefighters on scene than police officers. I'm not entirely sure what that means or what that indicates. We also have this video coming to us on social media from a reporter at Fox 45 Baltimore with another vantage point. This is Jessica Babb. She says a massive police response on Loch Raven Boulevard. The road is blocked off. And that is very apparent. Let's go back to the live picture. And you can see the fire truck, law enforcement vehicles. They're right in the middle of the road. And so hopefully, like I said, we do get some type of brief press conference. Usually how these things go, there are kind of multiple iterations of briefings as officials are working to fill in all the gaps in real time, just like we are here on Live Now. That's how we do it as well. Okay, so Fox Baltimore has a little bit more here. Let's take that. All right, this is what they have there. At least one person was killed and 7 people were shot in a mass shooting at a Towson funeral home Tuesday night. Now, that is quite something. That's new information. So they're describing it, Fox 45 Baltimore, as a mass shooting, that at least one person was killed and 7 people were shot at a funeral home. So what a turn of events here. Remember, we will wait for law enforcement to confirm those details. Of course, we rely on our local Fox stations in the area. You see there Baltimore County Police on scene. You see the yellow police tape on scene. This is coming to us courtesy of WBFF. So if it did occur outside of a funeral home, I don't see the funeral home in this shot. Of course, you see the gas station, you see the car wash, but our vantage point is obscured by the massive response there. So it's just a story we're going to have to stay on top of. We're going to step away from this right now. Hopefully we'll be getting more and more details. But once we do get more details, we'll bring you back to the scene here of this potential investigation police are conducting into a possible mass shooting there in Towson, Maryland. This is near Baltimore, and you still see a lot of these emergency management officials kind of meeting and commingling there in order possibly to devise some plan of action, maybe for an update. We just don't know. We're going to step away from this. We'll see you in 2 minutes. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. All right, we have a pretty cool Live Now look there over Lady Liberty in New York Harbor. It's about 8:45 there in the Northeast. Live picture as well at the White House in Washington. Well, not too far from Washington, we're monitoring a possible mass shooting investigation there. This is in Towson, Maryland, not too far from Baltimore. And so we'll keep this up on the screen for you in case we do hear from fire or law enforcement officials about what exactly happened. Fox 45 Baltimore is essentially saying that this occurred either in or near a funeral home. And so that is quite something. And so we'll wait for any updates to come on that. In the meantime, though, I know you are all following very closely these investigations. these briefings, new video, new comments from so many of these federal and state partners on Capitol Hill and in the Northeast about the drone frenzy. Still, sightings continue over the skies of the Northeast. And there was that classified intelligence briefing today for House members. Fox correspondent Nate Foy has more details. Let's watch.
Not given any evidence that there was anything nefarious.
Today, the House Intelligence Committee received a classified briefing on mysterious drones over 11 states.
The truth, even in the classified settings, is always a lot less exciting than I think people imagine it to be. I think it's inaccurate for the Biden administration to say that they're absolutely sure that there's no problems here. They're not absolutely sure.
Federal officials maintain there's no evidence to suggest the drones pose a threat.
Why does it have to be a classified briefing if these are just hobbyist drones?
I can't tell you specifically, what aspects are classified or not. I can assure you, though, that, again, we are sharing as much information as we can.
Several nominees in the incoming Trump administration joined the president-elect in demanding answers from the Biden administration.
We need more transparency for the American people.
Americans deserve to have a peace of mind when they're in their own homes at night.
Meanwhile, concerns persist about possible counter-surveillance at military sites. According to a joint statement by the FBI, DHS, FAA, and Defense Department, quote, there have been a limited number of visual sightings of drones over military facilities in New Jersey and elsewhere, including within restricted airspace.
Is it possible that some of those are surveilling? Absolutely. But can you make that assumption in every case? Not necessarily.
The Pentagon insists commanders are in place to detect and mitigate any drone risk.
What I think is the problem is the lack of communication and the lack of answers that we are receiving from our government.
According to several members of the House Intelligence Committee who received that classified briefing on Capitol Hill today, it is still the position of federal officials that there is no evidence to suggest that the drones are dangerous or that they belong to a foreign country. The skies are clear tonight, so we'll see if the drones come out. In Elizabeth, New Jersey, Nate Foy, Fox News.
Nate, thanks so much. All right, let's get into the Pentagon press briefing. This was a key focal point of some of the questioning from reporters, including our own Fox's Jennifer Griffin, to Major General Patrick Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary. Let's listen.
Yesterday at the off-camera briefing, so I'd like to just provide a quick readout of Secretary Austin's phone call with Qatar's newly appointed Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of State for Defense Affairs, His Excellency Sheikh Saud Al Thani. During their call, the Secretary reaffirmed the U.S.-Qatar defense partnership, reviewed opportunities to enhance defense cooperation, and discussed regional security developments. The Secretary emphasized the Department's commitment to regional de-escalation through deterrence and diplomacy, including through U.S. efforts to support implementation of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, uphold the enduring defeat of ISIS, and degrade Houthi military capabilities, jeopardizing the free flow of commerce in the Red Sea. He further reinforced the urgent need to secure the release of all hostages held by Hamas and achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. A readout of the call is now available on defense.gov. Also yesterday, U.S. Central Command forces conducted a precision airstrike against a key command and control facility operated by Iran-backed Houthis within Houthi-controlled territory in Sana'a, Yemen. Per U.S. Central Command's press release, the targeted facility was a hub for coordinating Houthi operations, such as attacks against U.S. Navy warships and merchant vessels in the southern Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. The strike reflects CENTCOM's ongoing commitment to protect U.S. and coalition personnel, regional partners, and international shipping. I would refer you to U.S. Central Command for further questions. Finally, a quick update on the transition process. Yesterday, the department's transition director, Ms. Jennifer Walsh, and representatives from the Office of the General Counsel, Washington Headquarters Services Security Office, and the DoD Transition Task Force met with 11 members of President-elect Trump's Agency Review Team, or ART, here in the Pentagon. In accordance with standard practice, the ART members signed non-disclosure agreements and discussed security procedures, including information security and next steps for transition efforts. DoD officials also showed the ART members dedicated office spaces here in the Pentagon that have been reserved for their use. For specific questions about the ART team, I would refer you to the President-elect's transition team. We'll continue to provide updates on the transition efforts within the department as they become available and remain focused on ensuring a smooth, orderly, and professional transition. And with that, let's take your questions. Go to AP. Tara.
Thanks, General Ryder. So back to the drones. Can you unequivocally say that none of the drones that are being spotted are DoD assets or something that's being tested within the Defense Department? Are all of these either civilian or otherwise, but just not Department of Defense drones?
You're talking about the drones in New Jersey up and down the... Yes, they are not DoD assets.
None of them are?
To my knowledge, none of them are.
Okay, and are there any sort of experimental programs going on where maybe drones are being tested that...
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. What about the ones that are flying over military bases at this point? Have there been any possibilities of collecting what sort of information these drones are doing or anything like that?
Yeah, again, just to kind of put this into context, and I know that our colleagues at the White House, FAA, DHS, FBI have all made this point. There's over 1 million drones registered in the United States, and on any given day, approximately 8,500 drones are, in flight. And so the vast majority of these drones are going to probably be recreational or hobbyist. They're going to be commercial drones, used in things like architecture, engineering, farming, or they could be used for law enforcement. Is it possible that some of those drones could be up to malign activity? It's entirely possible, but the vast majority, that is not, the case. And in the case of drones flying near or over U.S. military installations, that in and of itself, just given the volume of drone flights we see on a given day, is not something that's new. We take all of those seriously. We will typically, when we detect them, attempt to classify them and take appropriate measures. Is it possible that some of those are surveilling? Absolutely. But can you make that assumption in every case? Not necessarily. So in each case, commanders have the authority, installation commanders and authorities have the authority to respond appropriately, and will continue to do that.
Okay, just one other topic, Ukraine. Did the U.S. have any role at all, either providing intelligence or otherwise, in what looks like a targeted killing of the Russian general?
Yeah, I can tell you we were not aware of this operation in advance. We do not support or enable those kinds of activities. I've seen the reports. Don't really have any information to provide other than what I've seen in the press, and so I'd have to refer you to the Ukrainians on that.
Pat, last year, U.S. Transcom and U.S. Air Mobility Command signed an agreement with a group called the National Aerospace Research and Technology Park. This is in Atlantic County, New Jersey, and the agreement was to create a test and evaluation corridor for UASs, unmanned aerial systems, and advanced air mobility. Is it possible that these drones that are being seen in New Jersey are part of that corridor that was created a year ago to test these kind of drones and unmanned systems?
Yeah, and I know you're not going to be surprised by this, but I've had some of your other colleagues reference that press release. I did check with the Joint Staff to see if that was possible, and again, received confirmation, no military operations, no military drone or experiment operations in this corridor.
Thanks, Pat. Going back to Russia, the general who was assassinated in Moscow, how significant is that? Do you think that's going to change Russia's calculus at all in the war with Ukraine? And what comments do you have on the accusations that he was responsible for the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine?
I'd refer you to Russia to talk about the potential impact. Again, I won't speak for Ukraine. Clearly, this is a senior commander within the Russian military overseeing significant capabilities. But again, like I highlighted, we're aware of those reports, looking into them, but that's about all I'm going to have. So, Warren.
On drones for a second, what was the thinking behind sending additional detect and track systems to Picatinny Arsenal and Naval Weapons Station Earl? And are there other facilities that might get more of these systems in the future?
Yeah, so a couple things. So first of all, again, a lot of focus on this right now for all the obvious reasons, some of which includes those sitting in this room here. And so we're going to take this seriously. And so ensuring that installations, in this case Picatinny and Earl, have the capabilities they need to detect to identify and track as appropriate in the event there's drone activity near those facilities. To your other question, this is exactly what the counter unmanned systems strategy that DoD put out recently talks about, is looking at what are those priority installations, what are the trends when it comes to unmanned systems or unmanned aerial systems as well, and what does the DoD need to be doing in order to address that issue, particularly when it poses a potential threat to our personnel or installations. The thing is that I think we've all recognized the fact that unmanned systems are here to stay. They're a part of modern warfare, and whether it's here in the homeland or overseas, we want to make sure that we're doing due diligence to protect our forces and protect our equities from a national security standpoint. So, I think you'll see us continuing to look at that, and it's something we're going to continue to take seriously.
What systems are being sent and when will they arrive?
In addition to some of the capabilities that are already on these installations, these capabilities essentially will enhance base authorities' ability to detect, identify, track UASs. So, for example, this could include active or passive detection capabilities, plus capabilities like the system known as drone busters, which, as you know, employs non-kinetic means to interrupt drone signals, affect their ability to operate. All right, Kelly.
You mentioned that it wasn't all that unusual to see some drones over military bases. You mentioned this is becoming more and more of a common occurrence in the use of drones. But what would constitute it as a threat? What is the benchmark, and have you been communicating with other military installations to be ready for more of these drones, and how to spot if it could be a threat before it might be too late?
Yeah. Again, it won't surprise you, this is not a new conversation for us within DoD. I mean, as I highlighted, drones flying, whether here or overseas, is not something new, right? And especially in the United States with 1 million registered drones and 8,500 flying on any given day. Similar to vehicles that may inadvertently approach a base, the same can be true for drones. As to what constitute a threat, that obviously has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the drone is doing, where it's going, and so I'm not going to provide a blanket definition, but again, the idea here is that by providing training, capabilities, resources, commanders are able to assess and make those determinations. The other thing that I think it's very important to remember is that when we're here in the homeland, the authorities that the U.S. military has to detect and track these kinds of things is much different than it would be if we were in a combat zone. In other words, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities that we can employ outside the United States are much different for very good reasons. We don't collect intelligence on American citizens. And so that, of course, appropriately requires to work very closely with local, state, and federal authorities, law enforcement authorities, when necessary to address these threats.
And you mentioned the White House and the administration did share a bit of their assessment of what these drones are, but we know lawmakers are being briefed on Capitol Hill, and members of the public, this isn't really sitting well with them. They aren't really kind of taking this explanation for those that really saw these drones with their own eyes. So what would you say to them?
Well, again, I definitely don't want to minimize the significant interest and the concern that people have. But again, I think in the way that you now have this modern technology and the ability, you could go out of here right after this briefing and go and buy a drone, and you could fly it around your neighborhood, and as long as you're flying it appropriately and not in restricted airspace, there's nothing illegal about flying that drone. So again, just providing some perspective here, and I think the joint statement that we put out highlighted that the assessment in terms of what these reported sightings could be in terms of a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wing aircraft. Again, don't want to minimize it, but I think it's important to understand too just the volume of drone activity that will likely only increase into the future, and the fact that it is legal to fly drones, and if they go into restricted airspace, of course, we'll take appropriate action.
Just why does it have to be a classified briefing if these are just hobbyist drones, they're not military drones? Why is it a classified briefing on the Capitol Hill?
I'd have to refer you to Congress on that. Again, sharing as much information as we can here. I don't have the briefing in front of me, so I can't tell you specifically, what aspects are classified or not. I can assure you, though, that again, we are sharing as much information as we can based on what we know. Let me go to the other side of the room here. Chris.
Thanks, Pat. Two questions on drones. One, there's particular interest perhaps by us, but also from the U.S. government regarding the drones in New Jersey. Does the Pentagon have any indications that those drones in New Jersey are somehow different in size, activity, etc., than the drones that have been spotted at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Hill Air Force Base, and other locations in the past few days?
Chris, what I would tell you is we don't see a connection at this point between any of those activities. Again, just taking a step back here, 8,500 drone flights a day, but again, don't see a connection at this stage.
And then my second question, has the Pentagon determined who was responsible for the drone incursions over the bases in the UK over the past month, last month?
Yeah, to my knowledge, still being looked at. I'd have to refer you to the UK MOD and US Air Forces in Europe. Janie.
Thank you, General. Two questions on South Korea and China. First question, on China's espionage using drone, China conducted indiscriminate espionage activities using drones on U.S. aircraft carriers and military facilities anchored in South Korea. What message do you want to send to China, which poses a security threat to many allies?
What's the message to China?
Yes.
Look, Janie, I'm not going to get into any specific operations overseas other than to say, we take force protection, operation security very seriously. We value the partnerships that we have with our allies throughout the Indo-Pacific region and worldwide as we work together towards our mutual security interests. And so wherever there is a potential threat, we, of course, will take measures to mitigate, but I'll just leave it there.
On South Korea, the security vacuum is in chaos due to the president suspended his work, and the military leadership also as well as suspended. Is there any disruption in the U.S.-South Korea alliance, and who is the Secretary Austin, the current dialogue partner?
Yeah, so right up front, I would say, and you've heard Secretary Austin say this, the alliance between the United States and the ROK is ironclad. We continue to remain committed to peace and security of the Korean.
Okay, Andrew Kraft back here. You've been listening there to Major General Patrick Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary, taking a lot of questions on these drone sightings and what the federal government, especially the Pentagon, is doing about it and what the Pentagon thinks they are. In the meantime, though, we're in a new hour, a little past the top, and we want to take our first commercial break of this hour. A lot in store in this hour, including updates on that grisly assassination in Russia of one of these high-ranking Russian military officers, while the Ukrainian intelligence agency claiming responsibility. We'll be talking about that with the former U.S. ambassador to NATO after the break. Also, we are hoping to get, yet again, more details, more information about this breaking news situation there in Towson, Maryland, where we are told investigators are on scene, law enforcement and fire investigating a possible mass shooting there. This is near Baltimore, so we'll keep an eye on that. And, of course, this hour, we do want to focus our efforts on New York City. We heard from the NYPD commissioner and the district attorney there in Manhattan outlining this very broad indictment against 26-year-old Luigi Mangione over his suspected role in the assassination and shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. We're told that on Thursday in Pennsylvania, an extradition hearing will be taking place, and New York officials expect him to be extradited from Pennsylvania to New York to face first-degree murder charges on Thursday as well. So we're going to be speaking with Fox 5 New York about that particular story. Also out of the New York region, Long Island in particular, we got another major break in the case of serial killer Rex Heuermann. Yet another victim connected to him. That brings the total to 7. So a lot in store this hour. We'll get to all of it when we come back. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks for being with us on this really busy Tuesday. So before we get into all of those top headlines I previewed before the commercial break, we did just see on what we call tape playback, it's not live, but President Biden and members of his family leaving the White House for Wilmington. He spoke with some reporters of the White House press pool, and you might recognize, well, who is in tow with him? His son, Hunter. Let's watch.
Biden, trying to speak to the press before you leave office. President Biden, do you have any plans to speak to the press before you leave office? Sure. I'm heading home now from Memorial State. Will you hold a press conference before the end of the year? All those drones over New Jersey. What's behind all of that? Nothing nefarious, apparently. But they're checking it all out. I think it's just one. There's a lot of drones authorized up there. I think one started and they all got it. Everybody's wanting to get in the deal. But we're following it closely. So far, no sense of a danger. Will you speak to Prime Minister Netanyahu about a ceasefire deal in the next month? I've spoken to him. I'll just speak again. When did you last speak? Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so just brief there, that interaction with the White House press pool and President Biden. You saw his son, Hunter Biden, go out there to board Marine One on their way to Wilmington, Delaware. But Biden spoke there about so many of these mysterious drone sightings. He said, quote, they're nothing nefarious, apparently. He said there are a lot of drones authorized. He said, we are following this closely. So far, no sense of danger. You also heard reporters ask him there whether or not he will hold a final farewell press conference with the media as he is leaving office in just over a month's time there. One of the questions was this, on whether or not he has spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu lately. He said he will speak again to Netanyahu, though he did not say when. This, as ceasefire talks are getting ever closer to some type of resolution, so we're told, as these meetings will be taking place tomorrow in Cairo. Biden's CIA director, William Burns, is on hand for those meetings. In the meantime here, let's focus our efforts on the war in Ukraine and this really shocking, staggering assassination in Russia that Ukraine is taking credit for. The Associated Press has it as follows, that a senior Russian general was killed today by a bomb hidden in a scooter outside his apartment building in Moscow. This came a day after Ukraine's security service leveled criminal charges against him. Fox News senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has more on this story from London. Let's listen.
An explosion in Moscow, killing the head of Russia's nuclear and chemical forces early Tuesday. Officials within Ukraine Security Service, or SBU, are reportedly claiming responsibility.
We don't have a lot more information than what we're seeing in press reporting right now. We do not enable, nor do we support those kinds of missions.
Russia's investigative committee says Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov was on the way to his office when a bomb planted near an apartment building exploded. His assistant also died. Russian officials say they are now investigating the death as a case of terrorism.
The explosion was so strong. It was very scary.
At the time of his death, Kirillov was under sanctions from multiple countries for his role in Russia's war on Ukraine. And on Monday, the SBU charged him with directing the use of banned chemical weapons in combat. Russia has denied using toxic agents and instead accused Kyiv of deploying them on the battlefield. Over the past year, Russia has expanded the amount of territory it controls. On Tuesday, President Volodymyr Zelensky called on Western allies to take stronger action to stop Russian vessels from operating in European waters.
Doing so will not only cut off Russia's war funding, but will also protect nature.
Ukraine's security service says it has recorded more than 4,800 cases of Russia using chemical weapons on the battlefield since the war began. In London, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
Greg, thanks so much. And this Lieutenant General, his name, Igor Kirillov, he was the chief of the military's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection forces there. He was killed as he left for his office. His assistant was also killed as well. Authorities believe the bomb was triggered remotely. That's according to Russian news reports. Let's talk about this even further with our friend, former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. He joins me. And Kurt, good to see you here. I have to ask you about this because it is quite brazen and it is quite staggering here. Does it undercut Ukraine's moral authority? And were you surprised that the SBU, that's kind of like the Ukraine's FBI or CIA, they took responsibility for this so soon afterward?
No, I don't think it undercuts their moral credibility at all. I mean, here's a guy who is looked into for war crimes by the international community, certainly accused of that by Ukraine and having used or directed the use of chemical weapons in Ukraine multiple occasions. This type of targeted assassination looks very reminiscent of the sort of thing that Israel would do, as they did with bombing that Hamas leader or that Hezbollah leader in Lebanon or in Tehran. They're very good, the Israelis, at going in targeted ways against the people that are responsible. And so I think that's what we see Ukraine doing, and I think that's why they took credit for it, because they want to let the world know and they want to let Moscow know they can do this.
I see. So maybe Ukraine taking a page out of Israel's playbook here. But Ukraine did open an investigation into this lieutenant general just a day prior. Was that a pretense then, if they took him out the next day? And what do you think Putin is thinking? What's Putin going to do about this?
Yeah, well, first off, I think that this is a warning. They did this and then they acted quickly. And I think that is meant to be a signal to others in Russia's military chain of command or anyone who is waging this war against Ukraine that we can go after you. So I think it was deliberately done as a psychological part of the operation to say, we're going to identify you and then we're going to get you. So that was the first part there. As far as Putin's reaction or Russia's reaction, Russia is bombing Ukrainian cities, civilian infrastructure, energy grid every single night. Last week, there was a night where they had 200 drones and missiles fired at Ukrainian cities. The air raids went on pretty much throughout the entire night. And this is what Russia does every day. So I don't think that Putin will stop. And at the same time, I think he's already doing what he's capable of. So I'm not expecting to see any kind of major step change as a result of this, just a continuation of Russia's war.
So, Ambassador, we're coming up on the 3-year mark since this war began. We're on the precipice of a new presidential administration. Donald Trump will be back in office. How are you feeling about the trajectory of this war? Donald Trump spoke at length about it yesterday at his press conference there at Mar-a-Lago, and he was essentially saying a deal needs to be done, that you need to stop the war right now, freeze it in place. And so maybe we'll see kind of the contours or details of what that might look like in an incoming Trump-Vance administration here. Are you optimistic? Are you ambivalent? Are you pessimistic about where the war is going with the new administration? What are you feeling?
Yeah, so I am cautiously optimistic. I think that where we were headed with the Biden-Harris administration was a slow death for Ukraine. not enough support to make a difference, no clear objectives or goals as to what we're trying to do, not enough pressure on Putin to make him actually decide that it's time to end the war. So we have a new chance with President Trump. I think that he has emphasized repeatedly the point, peace through strength. And the key word there is strength, that he believes Biden has been weak, and therefore we need to show strength as the United States and make sure Ukraine is in a strong position. That is where I think he's going to put the pressure. Now, the one thing that I think is important to understand, though, is how does the world look at this? If Putin gets away with his aggression, takes a big chunk of Ukrainian territory, and then the U.S. steps in and tells Ukraine to stop fighting and that they'll never make it into NATO, and Putin gets to rearm and attack again, that is going to look like a win for Putin and a loss for Trump. And so I think that means that Trump will not want that to happen. I think he will want to make sure that not only does he end the fighting as quickly as possible, but he also makes sure this turns into a permanent peace. We have to pivot from just stopping the fighting to make sure this doesn't happen again. And that's going to require a lot of show of strength by the U.S., by NATO, and by Ukraine.
So, Kurt, are you seeing also a willingness on Ukraine's part to come to the table to start negotiation? I mean, they have been very, very creative on the battlefield in the last 3-4 months. The incursion into Russian territory in Kursk, Biden finally at the 11th hour allowing the Ukrainians to fire U.S.-made and U.S.-supplied weapons even further into Russian territory here. So do you see a willingness on their part to also, take Trump at his word, to get to the table?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, you know that President Zelensky and President Trump have spoken about 4 times in the last 4 months, or maybe even 3 months. In addition to that, you may have seen an interview that President Zelensky gave to Sky News in the UK, where he was saying exactly what Trump is saying, where he's saying, look, we want peace. We are ready to negotiate. We're ready to sit down. It has to be a fair peace, but we're ready to do our part. And it was right after that that Trump tweeted out, Zelensky is ready to negotiate. What about Putin? And that, in fact, is the problem, that Russia wants to take over Ukraine, wants to defeat Ukraine. They're not ready to stop the war. Ukraine has indicated they're ready to stop where they are. They won't recognize Russia's gains, but they won't try to reverse them militarily if they get credible security guarantees for the future. And that, I think, is where Ukraine has positioned itself very much in line with what Trump is saying, and Putin is simply not there right now.
Just lastly, Kurt, are you satisfied or are you confident because President-elect Trump has tapped some individuals who might be front and center for all of what we are discussing there at NATO? You know a lot about NATO. Acting Attorney General, or former Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, to be the next ambassador there. And then Keith Kellogg will be a special envoy for Russia and Ukraine. Their role could be very outsized in all of this. Do you have faith in their efforts?
Well, I do, but let's again start from the top. President Trump is going to be the decision maker here. He's going to call Putin, he's going to call Zelensky, and he's going to call the shots as to what he thinks should happen. And all of the others that you mentioned, Mark Whitaker or Keith Kellogg, they're going to be getting instructions from the president and doing their best to implement and deliver and report back. So I have great confidence in them. They're serious people. They're smart people. They have experience. And President Trump, however, is the guy who's going to be calling the shots.
All right. Ambassador Kurt Volker, as always, thanks so much for your insight into this part of the world. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. In the meantime there, I hope you found that conversation informative. Wanted to get that on your radar. Let's take a quick commercial break. Still a lot more to get to this hour when we come back.